Welcome. Come on in. Start it on up. It's another edition of the Weekly Trim with yours, Beardly Redbeard. At least the only guy who calls himself Redbeard in the next 10 square miles. Because, you know, there's a whole lot of us Redbeards out there. At any rate, appreciate you guys tuning in and joining us for another edition of the program here. Want to say thank you to those of you who have subscribed to the Wrestling with Redbeard YouTube channel. We appreciate our subscribers and those of you who have been around the channel for a long time. There are a lot of you guys out there now. We're up over the 1,000 subscriber mark, so we really appreciate everyone who's participating and being a part of the little community that we're growing around the Wrestling with Redbeard YouTube channel. And we appreciate everybody who likes, comments, subscribes, and especially shares these things, because that's how channels like ours continue to grow. We have been really impressed and really enthusiastic about some things that we've been able to do here recently. One of them being the previous episode of this program, where we got to talk a lot of wrestling, a lot of local wrestling, with Heath Mulligan and Jamal Talley, two guys who are very knowledgeable and who are very in the know when it comes to wrestling around this area. So if you have not seen that episode, or I should say if you've not heard that episode, this is a podcast after all, a podcast on a video platform. Yes, we got some heat over that here a few weeks ago, but guess what? It's all data, so it doesn't matter. You're still listening to our good old audio here on this video streaming platform. But we had a good time talking with those two guys about wrestling, and if you have not heard that podcast episode, please do go back in the archives here. It's on the playlist. You can find it and check them all out. See where we've been, see where we came from with this show and where we're going. Next is to talk a little bit about the fact that I hate this time of year. Yep, I am not a fan of summertime. Springtime, I barely will tolerate. Summertime, I absolutely cannot stand. It's to a point where I loathe summertime. And the reason being is that it's just so damn hot. Really and truly. And it's not just that it's hot, it's that it's humid. See, that's one of the unique things about living where I do. I am from South Carolina. I have lived in South Carolina all my life. And yet I am still not accustomed to what we experience each and every summer in terms of the just ravaging heat levels that come through here every year, each and every time. The situation is this. When it gets to summertime, I am perpetually sweaty. Unless I'm inside or in some type of air-conditioned environment, I am going to be sweating. That's just the honest to God's truth. I realize this, so I am not above carrying a small towel with me wherever I go. And to just be totally revelatory, I have carried a towel with me in the past. I could keep a washcloth or something like that in my truck. And whenever we've gone on vacation, like for example when we've been in Florida, or say a few weeks from now when we go to Nashville, I will probably have to carry a towel with me at all times, because if I don't, I look like I've just jumped out of a swimming pool and decided to go walk around in my clothing. It's that bad. And, you know, it's not a medical condition. It's not that there's something wrong with me. It's just that I am not very well suited to handling the heat. You know, I would like to akin it to my being some sort of a Scandinavian warlord type in my holy of holies, so to speak, there in my heart of hearts, you might as well go and say, to where I'm well suited to handling cold weather. I love cold weather. I would sooner be in cold temperatures pretty much any time of the year. But that just doesn't jive where I'm at, because you're not going to get much cold weather here in South Carolina. We've gotten a little bit more as the years have gone on. We've had some pretty cold winters here, which of course lends more credence to the whole idea of global warming being what it is. But there's a few people out there who still don't quite want to listen to that science just yet for whatever reason. But, you know, I would just sooner be in cold temperatures. But, it is what it is. We're here in South Carolina. We have to deal with what we deal with in terms of it being a hot, humid, sticky weather pattern. And if you're not from this part of the world, you may be questioning just what it is that I'm describing. Well, to give you a sense of what it's like, it's rather gross, but when you walk out of your nice air-conditioned environment into a humid climate like what we have here, it's like walking into a bucket of hot water or a bucket of hot, thick tomato soup. You might as well call it that, because that's the consistency of the air here. It is that muggy, thick, somewhat difficult to breathe air because it's got such a high content of water in it. This humidity is essentially the measure of water vapor in the air. And since it is also the warmer time of the year, where good old planet Earth here is closer to the sun, that water vapor is that much more thicker because of the fact that it's absorbing all that heat energy. So it's very weird. It's very cumbersome to have to deal with for someone like me who does prefer colder temperatures. And more than that, it's one of these things that, I never thought when I was growing up that my mom and my grandmother were telling the truth when they said that they could sense a storm coming based on how their knee felt or how their hip might have been going out on a certain day. But I can tell you unequivocally that based on how my left knee feels, we may or may not be having a thunderstorm that day. If I have a lot of swelling and stiffness in that joint, you might as well batten down the hatches because there could be a thunderstorm coming or there could be a tornado coming. It could be between one and the other, just depending on the level of what I'm dealing with on that particular day. So, yeah, really and truly, it's true what you see on that little meme that comes across Facebook there occasionally, where it talks about, I hope you are enjoying adulthood because the taste of ibuprofen is never going to change. And that's honest to God's truth. If you don't enjoy the taste of ibuprofen, you're not going to enjoy being an adult unless you're just very fortunate to either live in an environment where you don't have to worry about the atmospheric conditions affecting the way you feel, or you're just fortunate enough to not have any type of joint issues. I wish I could be in either one, but I'm not, unfortunately. So it is what it is. I'm looking forward to winter and to not necessarily having some snow on the ground, but at least having some colder temperatures, 5 or 6 months from now. But moving on from my dislike of the warmer weather, let's talk some wrestling. Let's talk about the upcoming WWE Money in the Bank pay-per-view. Is it still pay-per-view? Or are these things only broadcast via the network? I don't know. They might still be pay-per-views, but they might only be network specials. Whatever the case may be, there's one coming up this Sunday. It is the Money in the Bank pay-per-view, network special, whatever you want to call it. And it's going to be happening at the Allstate Arena in Rosemont, Illinois. And they've got what looks like 10 matches on the card here, which is, in my opinion, very excessive. They don't do, of course, a brand-exclusive pay-per-view anymore. This is keeping in line with what they started a few months ago, to where everybody's on the same card now. And this looks kind of like a combination of just a regular old, at least the undercard anyway, combination of just regular old matches that you would see on any standard broadcast of Raw or SmackDown. Of course, Raw and SmackDown haven't been exactly blowing up anybody's skirts here recently. We'll talk about that at some point here in the future. But to go over the card, we'll start at the bottom. Daniel Bryan is taking on Big Cass. Not a whole lot of interest there. You have another singles match where it's Bobby Lashley against Sami Zayn. Not a whole lot of interest there. Roman Reigns versus Jinder Mahal. Even less interest there. And those are the three that have really no stipulation behind them whatsoever. Everything else on this card has, in some way, shape, or form, either a title tied to it or one of the Money in the Bank contracts. To go over some of the other undercard championships, you've got the Intercontinental Championship will be defended by Seth Rollins. As he'll be taking on Elias. I don't think they'll put the belt on Elias at this point in time. although he definitely is going to be a title holder at some point in the near future. He's got too much going for him. He's really done a lot with that character, and the two of them have had a good feud, so I may be totally wrong, but I still think Seth is going to hold on to that title for a bit longer. Going on from there, you've got a tag team championship match for the SmackDown brand tag team championship, where the Bludgeon Brothers will be defending against Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson, a couple of former club members there. It's hard to say what they're going to do here with these two. I would like for Gallows and Anderson to actually get a title run, and I don't think they're going to get it just yet. I don't know why, but they haven't pulled the trigger on these two. And I don't think they will now either, because they've got a little bit too much invested in continuing to build the Bludgeon Brothers up from just being this kind of random reconfiguration of what once was the Wyatt family, where you have Luke Harper and Eric Rowan there in this new version of what they were previously. So we'll see what happens there, but I don't think Gallows and Anderson are going to get the title run just yet. I would love for them to get it, but I don't think so right now. Let's see. We have a pair of women's championship matches. Asuka will be challenging Carmella in what could be the beatdown of the century if Asuka was allowed to handle her the way she has handled some people in the past. I don't think Carmella needs to carry that belt any longer, especially going forward from this particular show, because, I mean, let's face facts. If you look at everybody on that roster, especially on SmackDown's women's roster, she's on the low end of the totem pole in terms of ability. She's been serviceable in what they've asked her to do. She's gotten better, but it's time for Asuka to have her turn, and for that to lead into a feud with whoever may come out of the Money in the Bank women's ladder match. It's, one of those things where it might not even be someone, though, on the SmackDown brand. You kind of have the thought that it could wind up being Charlotte Flair who wins that match. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but we'll go ahead and talk about it. In that match, you're going to have Ember Moon, Charlotte Flair, Alexa Bliss, Becky Lynch, Natalya, Lana, Naomi, and Sasha Banks. Great combination of talent there. But who comes out on top? I think you're probably looking at either Charlotte Flair or maybe Ember Moon. Just pulling two off the top of my head. I think they're the two that have the most interest going right now of that entire group of ladies there. Like I said, great combination of talent. And I think any of them realistically could be given a run with a title. But at this point in time, I still think Charlotte and Ember Moon are the two most likely to come out of that as the victor. Let's see. Moving on from there, Nia Jax and Ronda Rousey will be going at it for the Raw Women's title. Nia Jax is the champion right now. And Ronda, of course, is going to be... She's going to be champion at some point in time. Is it right now? I don't know. I still think that with this combination of titles on the line and whatnot, that Ronda is not quite there yet in terms of where she needs to be. This is only going to be her second match. So she's in, we'll say, somewhat of Brock Lesnar territory in how often she competes. That could change, though, very quickly. Especially seeing as how I believe I read somewhere that she's scheduled to begin working more of the house show loops. So we'll have to see what happens there. She's, of course, about to be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. So she could be on her way to big things there. But I don't think she's going to get the title just yet. I think they're going to make her chase it for a bit longer. Moving on from there, looks like we've got a title match between AJ Styles, who of course is still the WWE champion, versus Shinsuke Nakamura. And you talk about a feud that has had a lot of very strange going back and forth in terms of the finishes that have been associated with the matches, where it's like one of them or the other of them, or in some cases both of them, wind up in some way kicking each other in the nuts. This has been what they've gone for. We're not going to sell a back injury. We're not going to sell a rib injury or a concussion or whatever else. We're going to just kick each other in the dick until we get tired of it. And I think most people are tired of it right now, to be honest with you. But it'll be interesting to see what they do with these two guys. They've had great matches in the past, and unfortunately, I think they're now to a point where they've kind of used up what they've got in relation to their WWE feud. I think that they might give Nakamura a chance here with the belt. Unfortunately, I think this is going to be one of those situations where if he gets the title and then he doesn't immediately have success in his heel run as WWE champion, that the higher ups will look at him and say, hey, look, that's just proof. We told you. He's not interesting to people. We should never have been here. But it's pretty invalid in my opinion, though, because they've done such a poor job of continuing to make him interesting outside of just these basic finishes where it's, like I mentioned, one or another contact with somebody's groin being what caps off everything. It's just very weird. So we'll see what happens there as far as those two are concerned. The only other match I think on the card that we'll talk about is the actual Money in the Bank ladder match for the WWE World Championship contract. I said WWE World Championship contract. That's a championship contract for either that title or potentially the WWE Universal Championship. Could be one or the other. And we have a slot in this match that is not really known yet because it's going to be one member of the New Day. I'm not sure if it's going to be Big E, Kofi Kingston, or Xavier Woods, but the other competitors in this matchup are Braun Strowman, Finn Balor, The Miz, Rusev, Bobby Roode, Kevin Owens, and Samoa Joe. Of course, the going thought is that Braun Strowman is kind of in this to more or less be crowned the guy at this point in time. I think if he wins this, then we're going to really move away from people looking at Roman Reigns finally as being the next heir apparent. I would hope that's what happens anyway, because people are, they're never going to accept Roman Reigns as being the guy. They should really just get beyond that at this point. Either turn him heel, repackage him, something, but let Braun be Braun and do what he's going to do here and having an opportunity at the top. He's been a very organic evolution in coming from being you might as well go ahead and admit it, being a member of the Rosebuds there, to where he is now. It's been a really fun ride to watch him, but they need to go ahead and do this because they're starting to lose steam with him. It's got to happen. It's got to happen now and not later. So all that having been said, we will see what happens with that pay-per-view this weekend and see if they're able to increase some interest in Raw and SmackDown going forward. Of course, they've signed a big new contract with Fox Sports to broadcast their content in the future. That's not going to be happening for a couple of years, but that's definitely something that they need to build towards. And not only that, they're also looking at bringing NXT content to those networks. And, the question to me, as a fan of the WWE product, which one would you sooner spend time with this weekend if you had to choose? Is that going to be NXT TakeOver, or is that going to be this card that we've just talked about? I personally am really looking forward to TakeOver because, let's just be honest, the matches are always crazy at those TakeOver events. They're always good. And I think this is going to be another primary example of how the NXT brand continues to show just how hungry and how desirable those competitors are versus the people that are unfortunately stuck with what they're stuck with on the main roster. So we'll have to see what happens. We'll have to see how the whole weekend plans out because there's a lot going on with these weekends where they're configured to not only have a pay-per-view for the main brand, but also an NXT TakeOver special. So it's going to be fun to at least watch and see what happens. But we'll come back later on and get a sense of what they actually accomplished with that pay-per-view in the coming weeks, days, months, and whatnot. Hopefully it's good. We always cross our fingers and hope for the best. Don't always get it, but we do hope for the best. We're going to take a break here now. We'll get in some music, and then we'll be back in a few moments to talk more about a person who has been absent from wrestling. He's been competing, but not in a WWE ring, in a UFC ring. I think you know who we're talking about. We'll be back in a few.
your brain. Pressure in the skull begins pushing through your eyes. Burning flash drifts away. Disappears, burns the skin, finds not to ball. Frigid gold cracks the lips. How long have you lost in the frozen water boils? So together, joining hands, just a matter of time till the rivers fall apart. Middle lays you out in dire crowded tombs. Sickening ways to watch love, think of the cost. Seas of blood, very life, smothered down, frozen burns deep inside of you. A machinate, I don't bleed, waiting for the end of your wide awake night. Heart with a pain, reach out for you. His face of death staring down your blood, running cold. Injected cells, dying eyes, feeding on the scheme of death. You don't get created, pathetic. How the victims left to die. Roused, as you love death, flying free.
Hey everybody, appreciate you hanging out and tuning in and continuing to be a part of the program here on the Weekly Trim with yours barely, Redbeard. If you have not already, please do consider subscribing to the Wrestling with Redbeard YouTube channel. We appreciate your patronage and joining along with us and being a part of this little community that we're building around our channel here. We are all the time adding new content, whether it be these podcast episodes, match videos, highlight reels, all kinds of cool stuff happening here on the Wrestling with Redbeard YouTube channel. So we appreciate you tuning in and being a part of what we're doing here. If you're interested, you can of course subscribe, but you can also like, comment, and share these videos. Spread them around to your friends. We appreciate that very much so. And now, moving on from our initial topic there, we want to talk about, as I mentioned there in the break, or before the break, want to talk about a guy who's been away from the WWE ring and who's been in a UFC ring here recently. And we're talking about none other, of course, than one CM Punk. Punk, as you may have paid attention, if you're at all a fan of mixed martial arts and professional wrestling, he was involved with the UFC 225 card where he fought Mike Jackson. This was Punk's second official fight in MMA, and it went, well, let's say a little bit better than his first fight, but he still did not win. He lost via decision to Mike Jackson. He did last all 3 rounds, so there's something to be said for that in terms of his ability to absorb whatever punishment he was taking there. But I think this is probably going to be the kibosh on his MMA career, at least with UFC. It seems as though Dana White and everybody who's associated with MMA has pretty well said, you know, you had a good shot. You had probably more of an opportunity than anybody else who came from an outside industry to UFC without realistically any training whatsoever, and got a contract and got paid and got all this stuff kind of handed to you, and you still performed with mediocrity at best. I hate to say that, but you might as well call a spade a spade. And I'm not that big a follower of MMA, but I still know when a guy loses a fight, he lost a fight. And that goes back to my old days of watching boxing. I was a huge boxing fan in my youth. I loved watching the fights on HBO. They used to carry tons of action back in the early 90s and late 80s and whatnot. And, watching those fights, I forget which commentator it was, but they sort of gave a real layman's view of, okay, folks, if you want to understand how a fight is scored, but you don't really understand how the sweet science of boxing really works, look at those two guys at the end of a fight. Which one of them looks like they won a fight? And which one of them looks like hamburger? That's kind of the way it goes. If you have one guy who looks like he's been just sort of maybe freshly showered and does not look as though he's been put through a meat grinder, then guess what? He's probably the one who won the fight. Especially if the other guy looks as though he's, 10 or 15 pounds of ground meat. It's just, it is the way it is. And for Punk, that was what he looked like at the end of this fight. He definitely had been put through the grinder. Jackson, I, again, don't follow MMA very much, but he definitely came into this fight prepared and really showed the difference between someone who is cardiovascularly and also from a standpoint of just pure violence, studied his craft very well and made a big difference in how the perception of someone like CM Punk goes from being maybe thought of as a guy who could hold his own in a fight to being now recognized as someone who's really not that well suited to MMA competition. And even with that being the case, I will give credit where credit is due. He got his butt in that cage and he fought. Should he have been allowed to get in the cage and fight? Man, that's debatable. Because here again, you've got guys who spent years going back and forth and saying, okay, I want to train, I want to do this, I want to be a professional fighter. But then at the same time, you've got him who comes straight over from professional wrestling, never having realistically trained in any form of martial arts whatsoever, and he gets a contract, he gets opportunities. And I'm sure there's a lot of guys saying, what about me? I've been doing this for 10, 15 years. He's been doing it for 2 months. Why did he get a six-figure contract and I'm here not even making enough money to afford a decent car? And I think that might be the part that bothered me more than anything about this situation with this fight in particular, is that I read I don't want to call it a statistic, but I read a breakdown of the fight to where it said that Jackson, for winning the fight, made in the area of about $25,000. Punk, on the other hand, for making essentially an appearance, earned around $500,000. How in the world is that fair? I mean, it just does not make sense to me. It doesn't matter what type of sport we're talking about. For a guy who wins a fight to make less than 10% of what the other guy makes, that's just ridiculous. That's really just crazy. So, it's going to be interesting to see where he goes forward, Punk that is, where things are in the future for him, because he had a good week up until the fight started. He was having a good week. If you're not paying attention to what was going on with his life here recently, over the course of the past couple of years, he'd been involved with a defamation lawsuit that was brought on by one of the WWE doctors, who he, in an interview with Colt Cabana on Colt Cabana's podcast, The Art of Wrestling, more or less claimed was just continuously giving him antibiotics and not accepting or being willing to treat him for various things, concussion being one of them, various infections and whatnot being something else there as well. And Punk just more or less laid into the guy and was quite revelatory in terms of how he spelled out just how certain things work in the background in WWE, especially when it comes to their medical care. I would like to have had a sense that things were better than they appear to have been described by Punk, but at the same time, I believe wholeheartedly what he's saying was true, because these doctors, these medical professionals, whatever you want to call them, they're geared towards keeping these guys running. They're kind of like a NASCAR pit crew, to where they'll put a piece of duct tape on a hole in somebody's fender if it'll allow them to finish the race. Much the same case with these guys, to where if they are dinged a little bit, they'll keep feeding them antibiotics to keep them on the road and keep them going, because that's what keeps the machine turning. That's what keeps the money coming in, is these guys being able to make their appearances. So I don't doubt one bit in the world what Punk was saying there. But at the same time, he like I said, he was having a good week there because he did wind up winning the lawsuit. It was brought about by the WWE doctor, so it wasn't as though he was actually asking for money or whatnot. Punk, that is. The doctor was going over, or he was trying to get over on the sum of about $4 million from Punk and Cabana, but now they're both in the clear because evidently the judge there decided that this is something without merit, and we're just going to move on from this. So it was an interesting thing to follow in terms of the trial itself, because you had not only things about the backstage goings-on of WWE revealed in that trial, but also you had things about Punk's personal life that came to light in that whole thing there. And it's just kind of a goofy thing to mention, but for years fans have sort of gone back and forth and playfully debated what CM and CM Punk stands for. And it was revealed by the going back and forth of the dialogue in the trial there that CM does for sure stand for Chick Magnet. As weird as that may be, it does stand for Chick Magnet, because if you look back in the history of CM Punk's wrestling career, there was a point in time where he was a member of a tag team called the Chick Magnets, and it was Chick Magnet Punk and I believe Chick Magnet Venom, and the two of them had sort of a short-lived run there as a tag team, but he has forevermore held on to that CM as a tribute to the Chick Magnets. So there you go. The question now is, where does Punk go from here? Well, realistically, Punk can go back home and he can snuggle up to his wife there, and he can count his money if he wants to, because he's been, as far as I'm aware anyway, very good with his money. He does not live an extravagant lifestyle, and when he's getting paid $500,000 for an appearance basically at a fight like the one he had here recently, he can live comfortably for a while. Does he have to return to wrestling? No. He doesn't have to return to MMA either. He could return to his local Burger King or Taco Bell if he wanted to, and just live out the rest of his days doing that if he wanted. But do I really think he'll ever return to wrestling? That's been the popular question here, especially now that we're looking at being very close to the live event, that being All In, that's being put on by Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, and several other members of, we'll say, independent wrestling's elite. I'll have to say that it'll be interesting to see if he does make an appearance there, because it's in Chicago, it's in Illinois. It would be a huge deal if he did make an appearance. It would be even more huge if he actually wrestled on the card. Of course, the event's already sold out, so it doesn't matter if he makes an appearance now one way or the other. The money's already been spoken for. But if he were to make an appearance there, if he were to become a part of anyone's roster, he would be probably the biggest star in the world. Kenny Omega and he would probably be 1A and 1B realistically. But I really think that if he were to come back in that capacity, he would really, really, really have some great matches. But it would be, totally up to him in terms of how he wants to do that, because he doesn't have to do anything. As I mentioned, if he is going to end his career having done what he did in WWE and that being it, then that's going to be it. If he wants to come back and have maybe one or two more matches to say, hey, this is how I wanted my career to go out in terms of being a professional wrestler, then he can do that as well. But it's totally up to him. He holds all the cards. He could go up to any promoter in the world and say, hey, this is what my asking price is. Can we do something? And they'd be dumb to say no, especially in this situation to where they've already got some of the best talent in the world on the show. Can they afford him? Can they find a spot for him? They would be dumb not to. But do we even think he's going to be on it? Hard to say. Really hard to say. I would like to see him make one more appearance, though, because the way his career ended in WWE, I can only say that somebody like Bret Hart had a similar conclusion to their career in that when he left WWE and went to World Championship Wrestling, things just were never the same. And the same can be true, or the same could be said for Punk's career. So we'll have to see what happens. I'd like to see him at least make one or two more appearances to put a positive spin on what he's done with his wrestling career. But here again, I have to wait and see. So many things in wrestling are just that wait and see answer. And sometimes we get an answer, and sometimes we spend the rest of our lives wondering what might have been. So we'll have to just wait and see, won't we? Appreciate you guys tuning in. Please enjoy this musical break. We'll be back in a few minutes with segment number 3 of the program.
Look in my eyes, what do you see? The cult of personality. I know you're angry,
And we're back. Appreciate you guys continuing to hang out with us here on the weekly trim on the Wrestle with Redbeard YouTube channel. Appreciate you guys being a part of the program, tuning in and contributing in your own special way to what we're doing here on the Wrestle with Redbeard YouTube channel. As we've said before, please, if you're interested, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff that we YouTubers are supposed to encourage you, our viewer base, to participate in, so that they can continue to grow their coffers as well. Because Lord knows we're not making any money off this stuff. We're just doing this for the sake of having a good time and bringing you a bit of a conversation and things that we like to talk about. And another thing that we very much enjoy and like to talk about is video games. And of course, if you are a video game enthusiast of any, we'll say, grandeur whatsoever, you are familiar with the fact that E3 has been going on this week. And that's the biggest show of the year in terms of the actual conferences that happen around the video game industry. It seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger every year. And that's really cool, but I'll say it's also kind of depressing in a way because, I'm an old school guy. I have been around gaming since I was seemingly 6 or 7 years old when I had my first Nintendo Entertainment System. And I remember those games. I remember how challenging they were because it seemed like everything just got faster and more challenging the more you went into a game. And nowadays, it just seems like everything looks like a movie. And it's great. It's amazing that the technology has been pushed to a point to where we have almost this photorealism and in some cases virtual reality being available in a lot of these gaming experiences. But I can't not say that they have taken anything to really improve the gameplay experience in a lot of those situations to where, it looks better than it plays. Not being the truth almost 90% of the time. And really and truly, that to me comes off as a product of the era to where video game producers and developers now say, hey, we can go out making whatever we want to do. And at some point in time, if we need to issue a patch, we can try and fix it, or we can just say, we tried, and move on to whatever the next iteration of our product might be. That's kind of troubling to me. Because, actually it's very troubling to me, because you're paying $60, $70 for one of these games, and in some cases you get a game that when you first open it and put it into your system, you of course nowadays have to install these things, which takes 20-30 minutes, and then on top of that, typically on day one there's already a patch available for a lot of these games. So then you're talking about another 30 minutes to a half hour, or 30 minutes to an hour of time spent just downloading whatever patches are available for these things. So, it's frustrating from the standpoint of a modern gamer who at one point in time was able to throw a cartridge into a system and it worked perfectly and never have to worry about a update being published or having to sit there and install a title because they were worried about somebody being able to pirate a copy of the thing. That's somebody being, of course, the publisher of the game or the manufacturer of the hardware. And things have just changed so much. It's gotten so crazy in the world of video games that somebody like me, who's an old school guy who remembers the way it used to be, it's just very weird to try and keep up with everything. Especially since, as you mentioned, it's gotten more towards the industry being almost a quasi-offshoot of Hollywood, in that you're really focused on creating these experiences that are narrative driven as opposed to being gameplay driven. And it's cool that it's one way or the other for the most part, but I would sooner have those gameplay experiences than the experience, because of the fact that to me a game should be in some way competitive, not necessarily a situation that you go through. Like, it's one of those things where sports and video games should have more in common than movies and video games do, because the sports aspect of it is going to change with each individual playthrough. You're not going to have the same thing each and every time. With a lot of these games, the way they're laid out, if they even have a single player aspect of them, you're going to go through the same thing realistically each and every time. Unless you're talking about the big the big role-playing games like a Skyrim or whatnot, to where those games can deviate based on what your actual input is in them. But those type of games are few and far between. The reliance on the online arena to really deliver any type of replay value, to me, is, I'll say, it's kind of cheating the system in a lot of ways, because you're now saying, okay, well, we're going to make a game that might be decent in terms of what it does for the single player experience, but we're going to really push the fact that you have to spend hours and hours and hours in online competition to make any type of a dent in the game. And that is an offshoot of me being, here again, a person who can't spend hours and hours and hours dedicated to a game. And the first time I experienced this, it's way back with one of the Call of Duty games, where it was like, okay, well, I just want to play this game and be competitive right out of the box. Why can I not do that? Because prior to that point in time, you had games like Halo 2 and others to where, you had that system of ranking to where you were visibly better than someone else, but everybody had the same stuff out of the box. It was not a point to where somebody could get, the most powerful weapons by virtue of having played the game for a lengthy time, or even worse, by virtue of having bought them in some type of microtransaction. And I just, I really long for those days of when you could just get into a game and play and not have to worry about spending, as I mentioned, hours or hundreds of dollars to try and develop whatever your experience is with these things. So I think we're going to see more of that and less of the other in terms of the future of gaming, because it just it's really gotten away from what things used to be. And even the little handheld stuff, you're talking about having to buy coins and gold and this, that, and the other to upgrade whatever you're doing on those. I just want a simple gaming experience to where I can be competitive and have fun being competitive. I don't want to have to spend all this money and time and effort in trying to, get to that point, because it's one thing to award someone whatever upgrades for their having been good in the competition, but it's something else entirely to award them that either because of the fact that they just spent a whole bunch of time doing the rudimentary stuff that's involved in the game, or because they had access to mommy and dad's credit card, So it is what it is, and I know I'm not really bringing up anything new to the table here in talking about this, but with E3 going on, it just seemed like a good opportunity to rattle the old carpets there and shake out some of the bugs that float around in my brain in relation to the modern era of video gaming. So with all that having been said, we'll take our final break for the show here, and we will be back in a few with our closing remarks and another edition of What's Redbeard Drinking? Stay tuned. Welcome back, folks. Appreciate you continuing to hang out with us here on the show. Once again, this is the weekly trim with yours dearly, Redbeard. We're hanging out as part of the Wrestling with Redbeard YouTube channel. Thank you for being a part of what we're doing here. Check out some of those match videos. Check out some of our previous episodes of this here podcast. Check out what all we got going on here in terms of the Jam or Slam program. Haven't done one of those in a while, but I think we're going to be getting back into it soon. My wife and I enjoy doing that program a lot. But for now, what we're going to do is round out this here episode of the show in what has become sort of our tradition. It is the final segment of the program, the one that we like to call What is Redbeard Drinking? And we've got an interesting little, somewhat new item to share with you guys this week. This is Bud Light Orange. That's right, Bud Light Orange. You're probably familiar with the fact that they've had Bud Light Lime for quite a while now. And I will say that for as much as I enjoy all kinds of different brews and stuff that is of sort of various and wacky nature at times when it comes to beers, I am a huge fan of Bud Light Lime. It is one of the most easy to drink beers out there, especially when you get it nice and ice cold. It is very refreshing, very crisp, and that lime sensation goes very well with the light beer that Budweiser has been able to craft there. I really prefer that to even something like a Corona, which of course is historically served with a wedge of lime. But that, to me, the Bud Light Lime, that is the combination of flavors that you're looking for there without having to add anything extra to it. It's just a good, cold, crisp, refreshing beer to drink on a nice hot day like this especially. So I'm wondering if this will be more of the same. Now, I'll say two things before we crack this one open. First and foremost, I'll do the description that's on the can here. It's described as light lager brewed with real orange peels with natural citrus flavors. And we would assume that there are all kinds of other things in here as well. But you never know for sure what might be in these things. Let's see if we can find an ABV rating on here. Let's see, are you on here anywhere? It's 4.2% ABV, so nothing too outrageous here. Pretty calm, to be honest with you. But the other thing that I'll mention is that this was on sale at our local BP gas station for $1. This is a 12-ounce can that I'm looking at here. It's got their bullet-shaped cans, but this was $1. So just keep that in mind if you're wanting to sort of judge this based on the price. A lot of people like to equate things with what you paid for it in terms of the quality of the end experience. That's not always the case. So we're going to see if this lives up to a cheap brew that's not all that good, or if it's just something that they're maybe trying to get rid of that didn't sell all that well for one reason or another, or that maybe has just been mispriced because it's actually something good. So let's give this thing a try here. We're going to try and crack this thing open. I just cut my fingernails here yesterday, so I'm going to have a little bit of a time getting my hand into the tab, but here we go. All right. Now let's see what this thing smells like here. Get a whiff of the aroma. Definitely get an initial punch of the orange. That's very evident when you're getting a first whiff of this draft here. It dissipates a little bit after you've opened the can, so you can tell there's been an opportunity for that aroma to build up in the can after it's been portioned in here. Still, it smells good though. This is probably in line with what the experience was out of the Bud Light Lime variety. So let's go ahead and give this a taste, see how it goes here. Wow. That is weird. This is a very oddly sweet beer. I was not expecting that whatsoever. You commonly have sort of a salty sensation when it comes to beer, but this is very sweet, very much like orange juice. And it has left my palate very confused. I'm not sure what to say right now, other than the fact that this is very enjoyable, but it is confusing. Because it's like there's a little bit of beer in the background, but it's mostly the sweetness of orange juice that you get whenever you're enjoying this. That is crazy. That's very impressive, though, and this would be dangerous. It's like I said, if this is $1 a can, yeah. On a cold day in particular, this could be, or excuse me, on a warm day in particular, this could be very dangerous if you were having this as your main form of hydration. Now, I'm looking down in the can. I haven't poured this out into a cup or whatnot, but I'm looking down into the can, and it is definitely orange. So this is true blue orange beer. Wow. And orange does go quite well with beer. Varieties like Blue Moon and various Hefeweizens, that being, of course, a wheat beer, go very well with citrus flavors. So let's try this one more time here. Oh man, that's good. That's very good. And it's it's got a section on the can here that says refreshment with a twist, and that's true. That is really true. Wow. This is quite good, and I'm very much surprised at how good this is. This is, as I mentioned, a little bit confusing to the palate in terms of the initial experience, but overall, this is quite good. I'm surprised, but pleasantly so. Wow, I will definitely be checking this out again in the future. It's good stuff there. All right, well, there you have it, folks. Another edition of What's Redbeard Drinking. I don't think we've had a bad experience with this whole episode or with this program ending feature, whatever you want to call it yet. I'm going to have to try and find something that's really random and weird to give you guys a review of it, to really try and test my taste buds and my palate. And I'm sure I can find something of that nature. Oh man, but that's some good stuff there. Wow. All right, well, I'm going to finish off my beverage here, but in the meantime, I want to wish you guys well. I want to thank you for joining us here on the program, for hanging out with us on this episode of the Weekly Trim with yours, Beardly Redbeard. We'll see you down the road.